Hello, everybody. This is the 23rd intergenerational meeting. Our topic is cultural responsiveness and telepsychiatry. Our speaker today is Rodrigo Ramalho. He's from New Zealand, but originally from the other part of the world. This is the 23rd intergenerational meeting. Sorry. Our topic is cultural responsiveness and telepsychiatry. Our speaker today is Rodrigo Ramalho. Excuse me for the echo. Now, Rodrigo, let me pass it to you so that I'll stop. But let me also make you a co-host so that you can use this sharing the screen if you need.
Thank you. And I do have some slides, but I was hoping we could keep this meeting a bit conversational, because I am actually hoping to gather from you some specific examples. I guess more than a presentation, what I'm bringing to the table today, it's a question rather than a presentation itself. But I guess I could start with just a little something, but more like context to the question that I want to ask you than anything. So the idea is, I want to ask you about examples. If you could share with me examples of cultural safety in telecare. I don't know how familiar you might be. It could also be examples of ways in which clinicians adapt the care that they provide to be responsive to the culture of the person that they're caring for. And I know this is a big question, or a question that is hard to answer, because in my head, what I am asking is, when you are providing care to someone in Turkey, what do you do to make sure that the care that you're providing is responsive to the person that you're seeing? And this is kind of like asking to a fish, can you describe the water? Because I know I might do something different. For instance, if I am in Paraguay and I am providing care to someone from Paraguay, and I would do these things, but I would do them just naturally because I am Paraguayan and I would be providing care to someone from Paraguay. So our interaction would be just natural. So I understand it is a hard question to ask. Do you do something different? It's not really the right question, because it's not about whether you do something different. Perhaps it's more about what are the type of things that you do that you think other people in other cultures don't do, that you think you are doing them because they fit the context in which you're providing care. I guess that's kind of like the question that I'm bringing to the table. But to give a little bit more of context about that. So are you familiar, you're all med students, you are training. If I could just check with you, Farhad, Zeynep, Matthias, you are medical students?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I am.
And are you doing your clinical rotations? Are you seeing at that stage when you are either observing people providing care, or you yourselves perhaps as well?
Yeah, I'm in my last year at school. That's why actually we observe, and right now we are working actually. and providing care.
Okay.
I'm in the last year of medical school, and also I do clinical rotations and also at the same time observing patients. Yeah.
Okay. So you might not be doing these things yourself, but you are witnessing. Okay. And is telecare part of your rotation, or have you received any training around telecare as part of your training program?
As a daily care, actually, as students, we don't, but we help. We help the people who do daily care or who do care the patients. So yeah, we just observe them and help them. So
okay, and the same with you, or how I'm guessing. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Sorry.
May I say a few words?
Yes, please.
Yeah, for Turkey, it's indeed a large country, and in some parts of our country, we have some people who are not very much familiar with the attitude of people from the other side of the country, western or eastern parts, for example, or northern or southern parts. So I think the best way to understand for me, for example, if I'm practicing, would be to look at the eyes of the participant, either the family member or the person who wants the care or who has a problem. If he's coming with me, he's going with me, or she is going with me, I mean, I try to get the respond. So I have in my mind, I had worked in the eastern part as well. I had in mind that I might not be understood correctly with what I am saying. So this cultural safety issue is even a problem in one country, in the same country. And for the telepsychiatry, I think you have also asked that one. It's rather new, and I am not personally much involved with telepsychiatry, but I hear from my friends that especially for children, they practice that easily because people cannot, for example, reach the doctor due to the recent pandemic, but they want to disclose their problems, and Zoom or similar facilities are good for having contact. But of course, with some problems. I assume you will be talking about the pluses and minuses of that new tool, telepsychiatry.
Yeah, just briefly, because I would rather have this conversation and check with you a few things, because like I said, I guess I'm bringing more a question than a presentation, but perhaps to help us all use similar terms when we're talking about this, I thought it might be useful to first talk about what is telemental health, and then to ask you perhaps a couple of questions. Tele is at a distance, like television means watching and vision at a distance, or telephone in phone, it's like in audio at a distance. Tele just basically means at a distance. So telehealth is providing health care at a distance. Telemental health, providing mental health care at a distance. And that doesn't necessarily just include video conferencing. Like a hotline or a phone service is also telecare. And a lot of countries have like a suicide prevention hotline that people can call to when they're facing an emergency or like a situation and they want to have someone to talk to. But I would like us, I guess, to center our conversation on video conferencing. But still, there are different types of ways in which you can provide telehealth using video conferencing. But to keep it, again, very broad, telehealth, like we're saying, it's just providing care at a distance. And I don't know how familiar you are. Is this something you have run into, the idea of synchronous and asynchronous telehealth? Like, basically, synchronous means at the same time, in real time. Like right now, we're now in real time interacting. But telehealth can also be provided not in real time. Like, for instance, I could, for example, share with someone an X-ray, or share with someone images, or record an interview. I could have an interview with someone on Zoom, and or have a camera in my office at the clinic and record the interview. And I might ask the person, can you please walk from here to here? And I record all of it. And then I share it with someone to have a look at it. And then this person comes back and with an opinion. But when I think about telehealth, for this particular conversation, I am thinking about video conferencing. Now, the thing is that during COVID, telehealth has a very long history. There are decades of studies and services providing telehealth. But of course, we all were forced, sort of in a way, to use telehealth during the pandemic and different lockdowns that our countries faced. So, but I think what happened at that time is that we came to see this one particular way of providing telehealth, which is the clinically unsupervised settings. So I would be in my office, or I would be at the hospital, and I reach out to someone who is sitting in a clinically unsupervised setting, basically at home potentially, or at work, or anywhere that is not clinically supervised. And this is, I think, the way in which we mostly provided care during the pandemic. Everybody was at home, and we were either also at home or at the hospital and connecting with people who were at home. However, the idea was, I think, before the pandemic, it was more around connecting healthcare services. So we all know that there are just not enough mental health professionals around the world. Every country faces that problem. There are not enough psychiatrists, there are not enough mental health professionals in general. And most of them are always in the capital city or in big urban areas. So remote areas, remote from these big cities, or rural areas, they have to travel a lot to see a mental health professional. But very often they do have access to a medical professional or another health professional in their place. There might be a general practitioner, a GP, or a nurse, or someone who is providing care there. And the idea would be for the person that lives in this rural, remote area to go and visit their GP or visit the nurse, and they both together connect with the mental health professional that is elsewhere. And they have this conversation. And they have an interview, and the mental health professional provides an opinion, but then the GP or the nurse continues supervising the care for the person. So this was, I believe, the way in which, before the pandemic, people were mostly thinking about telehealth. It would be connecting different healthcare services, because specialists will be all concentrated in this one particular area, but healthcare professionals would be spread around the country, but perhaps not specialists. So it was a way of connecting non-specialists with specialists so that people were always looked after, but they could have the input of a specialist from elsewhere. And I guess a question too that we can ask ourselves is, does it work? And there are a lot of studies that have shown that it can be effective. There are certain limitations to it. For example, emergency situations, there are certain limitations to it. But in general, it has shown effectiveness. No, the thing that I wanted to talk, I think telehealth is useful because it can help address health inequities. And this is something you might also run into, the idea that not everybody in our communities share the same health status, but that is not because people, the easiest way to think about it would be that people don't know, or they don't have enough information, or they are not motivated to, or those are like the easy and perhaps even lazy answers to the question of why there are so many differences in terms of health status across our communities. But the thing is that actually people have different, it would be more helpful, I think, and more realistic perhaps even, to think about it, that people from different communities have different access to resources. So they have not everybody has the same amount of control over the things that have an impact on their health. There are people who have a lot more control over the things that have an impact on their health. And it is likely then that they are going to have better health. And there are people who have much less control over the things that have an impact on their health status. And it is very likely then that they will have worse health status. But these differences are not, sorry, Nasty, you wanted to say something? These differences are not necessarily due to individual differences, but they are just because of the social conditions in which you were born, or you grow up, or live, or age and work, etc. So those things that are due because of those differences that exist because of those social conditions, they create these inequities. And a big one here is access to healthcare services. So you might not have a lot of access to healthcare services because you are born, or you're growing, or you're living and working in a place where there are no healthcare services. Or for you to be able to access one is going to be very expensive, or you're going to have to travel a lot. So these are things that are not due to individual differences. There is no genetics involved in this. It's because of social conditions. And I think that's where telehealth can come and help a little bit. Because the main thing that telehealth can do is it can increase access to healthcare services. It decentralizes these services, that if they only exist in their physical form, they're going to exist as they have most of the time existed, all concentrated in large urban areas. Or even when they exist in more rural areas, they're still going to exist just within the hospital, but perhaps not, we won't have a lot of reach. So the idea with telehealth is that you can reach people where they are at. And you can also set up these services in places where people go. Like, for instance, there might not be a healthcare service there, but there is a community center, or there is a church, or there is a school, and you could potentially connect with the school where people are attending and provide care in that space. So there could be the nurse working at the school could connect with the pediatrician that works elsewhere, because the pediatrician has a hard time going to the school. And the way I think about it is ideally in connection or in liaison with local primary healthcare providers. So there is this, just the digital space then can help connect primary healthcare services and secondary healthcare services that otherwise you would have to connect them physically. So basically you would have to go to your GP where you live, they're going to make a referral, and then you have to travel elsewhere to see a mental health specialist. But if the digital space can bridge that gap, then that would be great. And that means a lot of things. That means you're going to be seeing someone early on, because it's going to take a lot of time for people, unfortunately, sometimes to have the money or have the time or have found someone that is going to be looking after the kids, or permission from work. So there is often, unfortunately, from the moment that you feel that you need care to the moment where you receive that specialist care, sometimes there's a big time gap. But if you can just go to the GP who can identify the need for you to also see a specialist, and that could be arranged then and there, and you say something like, why don't you come back tomorrow? I'm going to make an appointment with a mental health specialist, and they can see you. So we can see people early on. And we know that the earlier we start treatment, the better prognosis, or the better outcomes for most mental health disorders. And of course, you can also ensure that people are going to continue their care, because even with all the difficulties that there are for people to engage in that first appointment, those don't disappear once you have had the first appointment. If you have to have a follow-up appointment, there are also you're going to face the exact same obstacles to then go back and see again the specialist for your follow-up. But if we bridge that gap, then you can make sure that care is provided continuously. And it makes it easier for people just to engage with the treatment, especially if you're seeing someone that you know. If you're seeing someone from your local community, it's easier. And it's cost effective. It's for the client, for the person that is seeing the specialist, there is no need to travel. You don't have to ask permission to be absent from work for days. You can only be absent from work for the 1 hour or 2 hours that you would go to your local GP. You don't have to find someone who is going to be looking after your family for the time that you have to travel. It's much more private. We know there's a lot of stigma around seeing a mental health specialist. There might be less stigma if you can connect with a mental health specialist by going to your GP, and with your GP connecting with the mental health specialist. Therefore, it's more private as well. And a lot of other things. It increases your autonomy. You have much more control over what is happening. And like we were saying before, a lot more privacy. So the question that I'm bringing to the table, though, is about some things like this. We know telecare can be all of that, and there has been a lot of discussions about how helpful it can be. But the data continues to show that the people that would potentially most benefit from it is the people that are less accessing it again. And these inequities continue to affect the same communities. So if we, in our countries, the communities that have the worst outcomes in terms of health, the idea would be to implement these services to improve health equity for everybody. But apparently, things continue to not work out for some reason in some cases. And I think this is the problem. And this is where my question comes from. I think the problem is that we are replicating in the digital space the same things that are happening in the physical space. So basically in the physical space, we think, okay, we need to bring resources to everybody. Everybody needs to have access to the resources that we're providing. So we're basically replicating the kind of like the exact same health service here and the exact same health service there and there and there. So we think that we are improving things for everybody by achieving equity. We're giving everybody the equality, I mean, but providing everybody equal resources. If we give everybody this exact same thing, the differences might still continue. But the idea would be to provide people resources in terms of their needs, to match people's needs when you are providing services. So if we are to use the digital space to increase the reach of the services that we're providing, everybody then is going to have access to this resource. But that might not necessarily be a good thing, because it's the same thing that you're providing to everybody again. And there might be a need to adjust this service that you are providing according to the specific communities that you're hoping to care. So there might be a need to do things differently according to the community that you are hoping to support or care. So basically the idea is, yes, that one size doesn't fit all. And this is where my questions come. I guess I have a couple of questions. One is about, and please, this is, you know, I'm not grading you. I have no input on your final GPA at the university. So there's no wrong answers, I guess. I'm truly just curious and interested to hear about your experience. But here's one of the questions that I have. And the other one is about cultural competence, and the other one is about cultural safety. And Bullet, I would love to hear your thoughts as well. So with cultural competence, the idea is that you are finding someone, you walk into an office, you walk into the office, and the person that is there, that is going to provide you care, is someone who has learned at least enough about your culture to be able to provide you care in a way that is responsive to your culture. So this person has the ability to effectively communicate with you, connect with you, and your cultural background. So that person has cultural competency. Even if that things as simple as saying salam alaikum at the beginning, or asking someone if they would like to have a prayer to start the session, I don't know, that kind of things. And my first question, and I'm gonna repeat it afterwards, is about that. It's about examples, I guess. If you have witnessed examples of healthcare providers that you say, oh, this is great. This person is doing that to be responsive to the culture of the person that is in front of them. That would be one question that I would like to ask you for examples of that. But the other question I want to ask you is about this idea of cultural safety. And the idea that with cultural safety is that for someone to reach this stage, for someone to be sitting in an office in front of a person that is providing them with cultural competent care, they have gone through a lot of steps before to reach that stage. So they felt sick at home, and they felt the need to see someone, and that's when their journey starts. And it could be first about asking your family or asking neighbors or friends at work, who should I see? And then they would give you an advice. Then you would have to call to make an appointment, or you would have to go to the hospital to make an appointment, or to the clinic, or you go to the website to make an appointment. And you already start to interact with the healthcare system in that way. And the healthcare system might not be itself culturally competent, so to speak. So you might be going through a lot of steps that require you to leave your culture at the door, I guess. You have to become this sort of standard patient, I guess, because we're all equal. Unfortunately, we're all the same for the healthcare system, which is often not very responsive to our differences. And we have to navigate a lot of steps before finding ourselves in front of someone who's going to be paying attention to our culture. So the healthcare system sometimes, unfortunately, is not itself culturally competent, to put it somehow. And that is the idea of cultural safety. Cultural safety, it involves the importance of healthcare providers. It involves the need for healthcare providers to be mindful of the culture of the person that they're seeing. But it is also about the importance of the healthcare system to be mindful of the culture of the people that they're providing care for. We're not all the same. So therefore, the healthcare system should also be responsive to our cultural differences, because people are going to engage first with the healthcare system before reaching a health professional who might be responsive to their culture. And that, I guess, is the second question that I have, is about if you can think of potential examples of ways in which the healthcare system is responsive to differences in culture. But let me ask the first question. But I guess before even jumping into that, an ideal first question would be: Did that make sense? Was that? Do you have any questions about the things that I was talking about?
It's like, can I just say what I understand from your speech? It's like, actually you talk a lot of advantage of telemedicine, but I guess cultural safety is like one of the concerns that actually like lead some disagreements or lead some bad effects in telepsychiatry or telemedicine. And that's why we are talking about cultural safety problem, because with telemedicine, you can talk like with a doctor or healthcare providers like across the ocean, and it can lead a lot of misleadings according to cultural differences. Yeah, it's a point.
For example, yes, that's a good point. Like, I guess this would be the difference, I guess, when we're thinking specifically about telecare, the difference between cultural competency and cultural safety, which is sort of like a new term, and it emerged mainly here in New Zealand. The idea would be, if you are like me, and you're a migrant, and you're living in a different country, and you want to connect with someone from your culture, and unfortunately, let's say you're not comfortable talking to anybody here, but you're lucky to know someone from Paraguay who is providing telecare. So you reach out to that person and you connect with them online, and things are going to be things are going to be easier, I guess, because you're going to be talking to someone with whom you share a culture. So that would be, that person is going to have cultural competence. They're going to be able to connect with me at that cultural level. Now, in terms of cultural safety, before I reach out, like before I connect with that person, I'm going to perhaps first send them a message. And they are going to reply with an email, with a text, with a WhatsApp message, I don't know. And they're going to give me with all the steps that I need to take in order to connect with them. If I have how much, and that also should match my culture, I guess. That should also be something I can navigate before reaching out to be in touch with that person. For instance, and the easiest example would be if the information that person sends me, it's all in English, and I am actually not comfortable speaking to healthcare providers here because my English is not very good, and I want to talk to someone I can talk to in my first language. But when I reach out to that person, they send me a lot of information that is in English. And so it's going to be a bit harder for me to understand, okay, how do I click? Where do I click? And et cetera, et cetera. Is that making sense?
Actually, it's so simple details that you told, but it still affects just largely on someone's like healthcare need or healthcare access. And actually, in here, I can say that in our hospital, if I can give example because you actually asked, in our university, I see only telemedicine in like physiotherapy session because there's some like people they can come to hospital but they need to do some exercises, and like the doctor give like some, how can I say, like do this exercises like 5 times in a day or blah blah, and it's just actually only place that I see telemedicine, but I also heard a lot of them or just like experience them. And another thing I can say is that it's like there's one specific example that I remember that culture is really like matter. It's like in our clinic in gynecology and obstetrics, there's actually like old ladies that I can say like 50 or 60 years old, and it's like the residents and me and my friend as a observer, and actually the residents is going to ask like about sexual life of that person, and because she's like a bit older, she saw that she's going to be shy because in Turkey like not very topics. That's why we room actually that she can
Sorry, it's a bit.
I don't
It's a bit hard to. I got most of. I guess I could understand what you were saying up until the moment you were talking about how it might be uncomfortable for this client to talk about their sexual life with the. But then unfortunately the sound got a bit. To me, at least, I don't know if that was for everybody.
And for me, Ferhat, I think you have a problem with internet. While he's checking for his internet, may I say again a few things, Rodrigo? The points you raise are very important indeed, and not only in mental health, but even for face-to-face interactions. I have an example from emergency unit. The situation in Turkey about head covering due to religious reasons is an issue in the maybe last 10, 20, 15 years. And I have heard from an intern, a last year student, who didn't have a cover. She was refused by a patient who had a cover in her head. She said, when asked by another one with a cover, what was wrong, the patient said she thought she would not be understood by a lady, by a doctor who has not a religious sign. Actually, it's hard to believe, but it is a fact. It's an example. I mean, so we discussed this several times with different groups, that having signs with the situation about religious background or political background does have great effect on the interaction between physician and patient. For example, it wouldn't matter much telling that the person is not caring about the religious background, but the belief of the patient destroys the relation. This is without telemental health, just face-to-face relation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a very good point, but I guess it is about being mindful that an example I always think about when I'm thinking about these type of things is I imagine this made up story of people who go to a rural area in their country, in their communities, and they build the best healthcare service they could think of. The building is top of the notch, all the best equipment, and all the best things, the best professionals and all the best everything. And when they open the doors to welcome people back, to welcome people into the service, no one shows up. And everybody scratches their head thinking, what's happening? Like, this is the best thing you can get and you are not coming. And I think, unfortunately, that is often how we work. We look within. We look within and we are very mindful of the things that we are able to provide. But sometimes we tend to not pay too much attention to the people that we're providing for. And if what we are providing has not paid attention to the people that we're hoping to care for, then we are the ones that were at fault, I guess. I guess the best thing to do would have been, for example, in that example, to just go to the community first and check what are your needs, what type of services are you after, what type of professionals you would like in the, and then make something that is fit for purpose. So it's more about looking outward, I guess, than looking within. And in this case, we can. It's a dilemma. What are we prioritizing? Are we prioritizing? Yeah, in the specific example you were talking about, the dilemma would be a much bigger dilemma if there was no one who could have provided that care that was responsive to that person's cultural needs. So then it would be a much larger dilemma. It was great that there was someone that could come and but if there was no other option, then I guess then comes the dilemma. But I like the idea, just bringing back to something that Farhad was talking about. You were bringing up religion and political. I fully agree. Political disagreements can also be part of it, but also age and gender could be part of, and it's often an important one. Yeah, I'm just taking, because like I said, I am bringing a question, so I actually took note of that, like, because in my head I was only thinking about religion and ethnicity perhaps, but absolutely age, gender, those are crucial as well. You don't have to You shouldn't expect that everybody's going to be comfortable talking to you just because you know. There might be people who are not feeling comfortable to talk with you about things that they might not feel are appropriate to share with you. But yeah, any other thoughts, Zeynep, Sena, Nasli, Matthias?
I would like to add something. As you said, yeah, the patients are maybe are not comfortable to talk about the practitioner. It depends on gender, religion, also that kind of things, age. But I would like to add also the attitude of the practitioner, the way that the practitioner talk also matters to me. So
you like just like the attitude.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree. If you feel that the person is being judgmental, then you absolutely don't want to share anything with them. Nasli, please.
First of all, I'm sorry, I cannot open the camera. The connection is not that good here. And so I'm a mental health professional, a clinical psychologist working in war and violence, disaster contexts. And I have taken part in projects where we use telemental health, both with the client themselves, but also as a consultation practice. Like the GPs who are trained in, let's say, mental health issues, when there is a complicated case, they have this on-call direct relationship with more expertised people, support the staff on the field directly who can have face-to-face interaction with the clients. And definitely this was a very supportive and effective implementation to increase the capacity of the field workers, I would say, field medical workers. But when we talk about the clients and telemental health, most of the time the low resource locations, not only in terms of human resources, but also thinking of the digital or telecommunication low resources, it provides, it already presents a challenge to access this kind of services. So this is one of the challenges we usually have. Because also the awareness of, for example, especially in terms of mental health services provided via telephone or via online services, we always have this problem of confidential space that is not assured by the clinician, but should be assured by the client themselves, which requires an extra effort to keep the framework. And for psychiatric consultations as well, there is this problem of, you do not have the direct access to the physical appearance, physical positioning of the client, which is also a very important part of the clinical examination. Though it is the modality that would be very much useful in low resource context when we do not have any other chance, but it comes with a lot of cons that we need to consider for the quality of the service that we would be providing. So, then I find it much more, I don't know, sorry if I'm taking too much time, but I would be much more into improving this telemental health consultation framework and capacitating the available resources, human resources on the low resource settings, rather than putting it as a service for the clients themselves. Because in any case, when you do not have yes, we make the service available to the client, but if we do not have the client who is also appreciative, or let's say, how to say, who doesn't know how to use the system, who doesn't know how he should evaluate the service he is taking, then it is like it can be a bit superficial. If I make it, I mean, if you have a client who thinks that he is having a psychiatric consultation with a telemental health, but who is not aware that a psychiatric consultation should also require his physical positioning, let's say, he will receive the treatment or the consultation, but without knowing the quality of the service that needs to be provided, so that to ensure that everybody has the access to the same kind of medical service. Yeah. I don't know what would be your thoughts about it.
I don't know. I agree, and I'm making also a note myself, because, like I'm saying, this is truly a question and a learning opportunity for me as well. And the note that I make is we were talking about how, because of the pandemic, most people who hadn't practiced telecare before and who were forced to practice telecare all of a sudden became very familiar with the idea of providing care to someone who is at home. So these unsupervised settings, clinically unsupervised settings. But that the idea before the pandemic, the trend was to think about telecare more as something that could connect healthcare services rather than specialists with someone at home. It was more exactly what you were describing it, because then you have someone on the ground that can continue the care, or the person can connect with, or that can help can help navigate the digital space and all of that. So if there is someone on the ground that the specialist can connect with, I'm realizing now that is also that itself can be a way of ensuring the cultural responsiveness of the service. That if you just open the service, like in terms of you just basically say, look, I have a telehealth service. This is the link. This is the phone number. Then it might not match everybody's digital literacy or levels of comfortability. So just to the fact of connecting with someone on the ground at a distance who can help you connect with the patient, let's say, or the client, that itself can also be a way of ensuring cultural responsiveness. I don't know if I'm making sense, sorry, but I'm just perhaps sharing with you what I'm taking from what you said, but because I fully agree 100%. It is yeah, with everything you've shared. Yeah.
I would also like to thank Nazlı Sinem that the points she has brought are very important. Maybe, as you have said, Rodrigo, it might be possible for some people on the ground, to reach people and tell them that these are the options. You can reach such people from this channels. And also, Nazlı Sinem has also, if I have understood correctly, said that the person getting the help should also be able to evaluate the provided help. This is an interaction, a real interaction. We need a long way to go to have these implemented in the true sense, I think.
Mm-hmm. But that's work that is necessary, because otherwise, like we were saying before, if we're looking just within and we say, oh, I'm going to provide the best service, and people are not accessing, and we then end up blaming people for not accessing this best service that I'm providing, That's potentially not perhaps the right way to look at it. It would perhaps then be ideal to wonder, what is it that is preventing people from accessing this service? And as Nasli was saying, there could be a lot of things. One of them could be, of course, just basically people don't have the resources to access this service, or they don't have the literacy to navigate the digital space and connect with me, or they don't feel comfortable talking to someone over a screen, and it feels not very personal. So then a response to that could be absolutely connecting with someone there, and there are studies that have proven that these physicians or these healthcare professionals that are there on the ground, they themselves become more effective in their assessment and the provision of care on mental health. Like they learn from these interactions as well, and they become themselves more effective in recognizing a mental health issue and coming up with potential solutions, like first recommendations regarding treatment and things like that. So, and that is another advantage as well of these connections and at a distance. They serve as impromptu training, but they could also be actually set up for training. It could be about connecting with people over there to provide them with the necessary resources so that they can then care for their communities. Yeah. I'm mindful of the time, but still, if anybody has any other comment, I would love to hear it. And thanks again, everyone. Yeah.
I would like to ask one thing before finalizing. You're right, it's almost an hour. What were the disadvantages of telemental health that you would like to underline, in addition to the all positive aspects?
And I think, like with most things, there are the disadvantage. It could be very often we have run into this issue of people not. We tend to think, oh, everybody has a phone, for example. Everybody tends to have a phone at least, but that's not really a good, because yeah, people might have a phone, but they might have a phone per family or a couple of phones, or the adults have the phone, or more than that, people might not have enough data. That, like, you have to pay for the data. You might not have so the assumption that everybody has access to this resource, so therefore we could easily connect with everybody. That's not necessarily always true. That is one thing. Is the wrong assumption, I guess, most of the time. As Nasli was saying, it is hard to do that physical evaluation as well at a distance. That's something just basically you just cannot do. And in emergency situations, there might be some limitations as well. But and I'll pass the mic to you, Nasli. I don't know if your hand is raising hand is a new one, and it has stayed from before. But the one thing I would like to add, though, is that, like with most things, barriers can become facilitators if they are recognized, acknowledged, and addressed. So, for instance, when you're preparing an appointment for someone and you're going to be seeing this person at a distance, and you are aware that it's going to be hard to do something in case of an emergency, you can prepare for that. And ideally, you would, for example, have the phone number of people nearby that you can call if you feel that there is a need to do that, and things like that. So, yeah, I don't know. But Nasli, I'm mindful. Are you raising your hand?
Oh, yeah, just if we are having the time, I totally believe that the obstacles turn into a opportunity to improve the service. And I would like to add something about the confidentiality issue. Already in the settings or violence settings where the survivors of torture, survivors of of political violence, they hardly ever approach to mental health professionals to have some support. And when, in the physically, I mean, they do not like to come to the centers, they do not like to be known to have services, to psychiatric services. And then telemental health could be a very good opportunity for them to have access to services. However, then comes the bigger issue of digital confidentiality. And so, I mean, I can make a Zoom, I can make a WhatsApp call, phone call, but in those settings already, these are already things that also alert the clients for confidentiality issues, and the clinician needs to assure of the confidentiality for the third parties who may have access to these let's say these consultations. So in most of the settings, these telemental health services are being provided in via normal communication lines. And if, for example, we can have an encrypted or at least a kind of a encrypted technologies that would assure the customer, the clients, for the confidentiality of the content, this can also increase the number of beneficiaries who would really get support from this kind of a service, because physical service is not an option for them for most of the time.
100% agree. And there are platforms that have been developed for that purpose with these additional layers of safety. But of course, most of them are not free. But I 100% agree. And just you made me remember something else as well, Nasli, which is the idea that very often people are going to have troubles finding, if we are connecting with someone who is at home, rather than visiting a local healthcare service to connect with us. If they are at home, sometimes people are going to have troubles finding a private space to connect with us from home, because there might be a lot of people there that are making it just harder for them to, and that brings issues. Yeah, that can bring other issues there as well, and you don't know who is at the other end. But again, being mindful of that, for example, I was talking to a pediatrician the other day about this, and she was saying, depending on what the purpose of the consultation is, I might ask the person to connect with me, either using their computer or using their phone. Because if I want them, for instance, to show me around the house, I would ask them to use their phone for at least the beginning of the consultation. And I don't know, being mindful and using potential ways around it, I guess. But yeah, I'm like I said, I'm mindful of the time. I just want to say before closing, and I'll perhaps ask for any final thoughts before closing the session. Any final thoughts?
Many thanks.
Actually, I never thought about this of or that, and thank you. I guess I just my.
You could write maybe, Ferhat.
Sorry about that.
Okay, Rodrigo, thank you very much. And thanks for the participants. I'm closing the stream. For those who might stay, please stay with us.
Thanks, everyone.